So give me one moment to pull up our other presentation. So the topic today is positive behavior interventions and supports, and specifically how you can use some of these practices in your home. I imagine a lot of you already use a lot of positive techniques in your home, so hopefully this presentation today will maybe spark a new idea or maybe help you reconsider how you might take a slightly different approach. I wanted to mention a bit about who we are first. Vermont Family Network is involved with PBIS because we do partner with the now agency, Vermont Agency of Education. And Laurel and I come to you today, as we kind of jokingly said, we have doctors of motherhood. So we don't have any initials after our name. We don't have any educational qualifications, but we do have kids who have special needs, as do all of our colleagues here in Vermont Family Network. And we are parents, and our organization really is about parents helping other parents. So to get started, let's talk a little bit just about what positive behavior interventions and supports. It's the shortened acronym is PBIS. It's really about taking a positive approach to getting the kind of climate that we want. PBIS is used in the schools, but mostly our focus today is going to be how to take some of those techniques into your home as well. I want to give credit to where this PowerPoint presentation came from. It is from the Pacer Center. You can see their web address is there, pacer.org. And they have a whole variety of information, including a series of presentations around PBIS, as well as lots and lots of other information that you may find helpful. So what is PBIS? It is evidence-based, research-based. It's really not a specific template that you follow, but rather a strategy or a set of practices. The ultimate goal of implementing PBIS is for students in a school setting to have a safe and a positive climate for them to learn and to grow. And when used in your home, it's to create the kind of family that you'd like to have. I think most of us would agree we would like to have harmony and peace in our homes. We would like to have good relationships with our children. Nationally, when it's used in the school, there's a lot of evidence that is now linking the effective implementation of PBIS with improved academic outcomes. And before we go any further, I wanted to just have us visit a website that I think is a really good resource, which is the PBIS Vermont website. What you will find on this website, number one, is if you look at what schools are involved, you can click on contact information and you can see all the lists of the schools if you scroll down to see whether or not your child is in a school that has PBIS. If so, there's all the contact information. As a parent, I know schools are always looking for parents to be involved with PBIS, so if that interests you, I'm sure they would be more than happy to have you contact them. There's also a variety of trainings and resources. It's not wanting to open for me, but one of the resources you'll find there is a link to this presentation we're looking at today, as well as a link to Vermont Family Network where you will see a guide about PBIS specifically designed for families. So we'll go back to our presentation. Oh, here we go. Here's various trainings, and here's various resources. So if you look here for families, you follow the link to PBIS for parents. That's going to take you to Vermont Family Network. We have a presentation, we have a booklet, and the training modules are the one we're looking at now, and some others associated around PBIS. So those are all really good additional resources. So I'm going to close that out and go back to our presentation. So PBS is really based on the underlying concept that behavior is learned just like you learn math and reading. If a student is having difficulty with learning math or learning reading, we take a teaching approach, but sometimes with behavior, we're more likely as schools and sometimes in our own families to try to punish or shame a child into better or different behavior. I'm not saying we do that all the time, but it is pretty prevalent. So the way PBS works is really thinking ahead of time. What is the behavior that you want to see? So this is true in the school. It's also true in your home. To teach the expected behavior and to practice it, ideally you're doing that in the setting where the behavior is needed. So if you're talking about what behavior you want on the bus, you're not going to talk about that in the classroom. You're going to do that practicing at the bus, maybe with the bus driver. Everybody's going to agree on behavior, so behavior isn't one way with one bus driver and different with another bus driver, and that there's going to be meaningful reinforcement and logical consequences for problem or negative behaviors. These I think if you're a parent, I have kids that are very challenging, have been very challenging. These all seem very easy when you're looking at on a slide and very, very challenging as you try to implement some of these in your home. So it is really an ongoing effort. PBIS is not a quick fix. It's not a parenting technique. And I think it's important to kind of, before we even move forward, to talk about what are some of the big ideas of PBIS. And really PBS is about changing adult behavior. And it really is looking at changing the culture within your home. And the way I like to think of culture, it's like the fish are swimming in the fishbowl. And the culture is the water that they're swimming in. It's everything around you. It's how things get done in your family. It's how you interact with each other. And PBIS really asks us, can we have at least 4 to 6 positive interactions with our child for every negative interaction? And I can say honestly that I have found that particularly challenging. And I found it very challenging sometimes to be real consistent. One behavior one day maybe has one consequence. The next day it might have a different consequence because I'm in a somewhat different mood. So moving along. So PBIS in school, here's some examples, and you would use these same ideas in your home. You don't want to have, and I did this early on as a parent, I had a huge long list of rules on the refrigerator, and it lasted about one day till I took it off and threw it out. And the point being is that you have to start with what's the most important. Keep things simple, keep the rules really broad. And here's an example. Be responsible, be respectful, and be helpful. You're trying to describe what that means in each situation. And in a school setting, the school is really agreeing across classrooms, across settings, that the rules are going to apply in the lunchroom, on the playground. And we're really reteaching as much as possible, again and again, as much as is needed, and really recognizing and rewarding the behavior you want to see. The underlying belief being that you generally get more of whatever it is you focus on. So we're going to focus on the positive, try to find people doing things the way you want it done. If you look at this slide, here's just, and this isn't going into a lot of detail, it's just for purposes of giving an example, some examples of how PBIS would look in a school. And each school is deciding what are those big rules. So what does that look like in the classroom to be responsible, respectful, and helpful? Lunchroom and the bus. So it gives you an idea. If you have a school, if you have a child that is in a school that has PBIS, you would probably see posters around instead of seeing, no running, no hitting. You're going to see things stated in a positive way. These are just some school examples. School might give a ticket when they see the behaviors being caught. After so many tickets, you might, have a pizza party. As a parent, one consideration that I always think about is, what is going to work in your family, and that reinforcement and rewards want to be meaningful to what your family is trying to achieve. And I always try to keep in mind that rewards are not necessarily monetary or money-based. I tried early on with my kids doing rewards. I thought, this is a great idea. So, you know, they did the behavior I wanted, and I bought them, they just love these little Matchbox cars. So I bought them a Matchbox car, and then next week, you know, they would do whatever. And I was like, hey, great. So if they didn't want one, they wanted two. So I was thinking if I continue, you know, on this course of them wanting more awards, you know, why wouldn't they? It's kind of a good deal here that I would be buying them, you know, a BMW by the time they got their driver's license. So that definitely wasn't going to fit with the family budget. So we started to, my husband and I, to rethink about what are some meaningful ways to reinforce. I do want to talk just a bit because I don't see it on any of these slides. I'm going to turn this over to Laurel here in a minute, and she's going to talk about how PBIS is used in her daughter's school. But, you know, part of reinforcement, you know, there's different words that you see throughout this presentation, rewards and acknowledgement. But I think to me one of the pieces that really has resonated is also the importance of encouragement. I recently took a parenting class through South Burlington School District, where my daughter goes to school. The name of the class, I just love the name, was called Duct Tape Parenting. The presenter is a parent of 5. Her name is Vicki Hoffel. She's a Vermonter. And she wrote a book. She actually has a website called Parenting on Track. So I just want to read a short excerpt from her book, Duct Tape Parenting, about encouragement. She quotes Dr. Rudolf Dreikurs, and if you Google his name, he's got a very interesting, he was a psychiatrist and an educator. But this is a quote from him. Quote, "Encouragement is more important than any other aspect of child raising. It is so important that the lack of it can be considered the basic cause for misbehavior. A misbehaving child is a discouraged child." And then she goes on to comment, "Encouragement is an observation. To encourage, you notice. So you may say to your child, you're hurt, you're angry, you tied your shoe, you got an A, or you flunked the test. There is no judgment attached to the observation. It is a way to open up a conversation and allow children to share their experience and their feelings with someone they trust. Encouragement is acknowledging. To encourage, you tell someone, your help made the job easier. Your sense of humor had me giggling instead of crying, or you helped your brother even though you wanted to watch your show." So to me, encouragement, rewarding, it isn't about taking any kind of nagging comments, and gosh knows, you know, I've done my share of nagging and saying please in front of the nagging, and it's not about saying awesome every other sentence, but really, I think, doing some of the things that I just read from the book and really being very specific about what it is you're seeing and what kind of behaviors you're appreciating. So now I would like to invite Laurel to talk about PBIS, her PBIS experience. Her daughter goes to a school that has PBIS, and talk a little bit about what they both have liked about it. So here is Laurel.
Good morning. So when I first heard about PBIS, it was actually when I began working here at Vermont Family Network, and I read the little booklet and information the folks here had worked on with the Department of Education. And I have to admit I wasn't really all that excited about it because I hadn't really seen it in use. The first time that I think that I really heard anything about it was I think it was about 3 years ago. We got a new principal, and I heard from the kids that they were earning lunch with the principal. And I'm not even sure that this was full-fledged PBIS, but I believe it was some sort of a reward system that they could earn. So I didn't find a whole lot out about it until the beginning of last school year. My daughter's in elementary school, and we had a new principal, and I started to understand a little bit more about it last year. Our school started kind of coordinated the kickoff, I believe, and their commitment to it. They had a mascot that started working with the kids and to get the kids all excited about it. And I'm just going to read what our school's philosophy is about PBIS. So their kind of broad statement is we're a positive community of learners. We work together to learn, grow, and always do our best. And then those three kind of broad goals that, or three or four that Janice mentioned from the slide, our school focuses primarily on respect, and they have respect begins with our school, respect yourself, respect others, and respect your environment. So the students are introduced to the behavior expectations at the beginning of the school year and are reminded of them throughout the year. And as Janice mentioned, I've seen signs in different classrooms and in the general areas of the school. They learn and practice how to respect themselves, respect others, and respect their environment in the classroom, hallway, bathroom, cafeteria, gym, and on the playground. When students are caught meeting expectations, they are given a link, these little plastic links that go together, to add to their classroom's collection jar. When the classroom jar is filled, the class lights a bulb on the sign. They've put the letters of the school on a board in these big Christmas lights, and they get to light one bulb when their classroom fills up a jar. And that's, I was actually in school this morning, and that's posted, that's put up really in a display case where everyone can see it at school. I noticed they had a few lights yet to light. And then when the whole school lights the sign twice, they celebrate with a school-wide celebration, like Crazy Hair Day. Sometimes it'll be an ice cream celebration, a variety of things that would appeal to a variety of children. When students are not following the behavior expectations, they are given a friendly reminder about the expected behavior and our school-wide expectations. If the unexpected behavior continues, teachers and staff will problem solve with students to determine if they recognize what they are doing wrong and how to fix it. More serious consequences will be given if a student misbehavior continues after redirection. Students are given 4 opportunities to correct their misbehavior before being referred to the Student Support Center. And then it just says serious misbehavior will result in an immediate referral. I'm assuming that probably is maybe around safety issues and things that they can't really tolerate. So I really think it's a good thing. It's kind of funny. The first thing that I saw was the Christmas lights on the board, and at first I thought, oh, what is this? And I have to admit, as a parent, I thought it was a little bit tacky at first, but the kids really like it. They like the links. Every once in a while we'll get an email saying the links are getting low, please have your kids bring them back in, because sometimes they get really excited and they bring them home with them. But my 4th grader even still enjoys it. I like the positive approach to it. I do have to admit that I don't hear as much about the misbehavior, so I think as a parent I would like to understand that a little bit more. They have it stated in their kind of in their feeling about PBIS, but I would like to kind of know a little bit more about that as a parent. When I asked my daughter what she thought of it, I kind of explained what I was talking about, and her comment was that it's cool. I'm going to hand back over to Janice.
I think Laurel touched upon the school really having to take the time as they implemented PBIS, which, by the way, isn't something that happens overnight. It's a multi-year process to implement PBIS at a school that's doing it with fidelity. So in other words, they're doing it in the way it's been defined, collecting the data, really using evidence-based practices for consequences. So what the school has done, and what you'll be doing in your own home, you've already done it, is looking at what are the minor misbehaviors and what are the major misbehaviors, so that teachers are being consistent, and that as much as you can as parents you're being consistent what you as a mother might think is minor, if your husband thinks that's a major misbehavior, chances are the consequences may not be very consistent. These are just some examples of how a school might take care of minor misbehaviors or major misbehaviors. The ultimate goal, though, of PBIS and what it's been found in the schools is when PBIS is successfully implemented, students are spending a lot less time and administrators are spending a lot less time around disciplining kids and having administrative referrals, and kids are spending more time in the classroom learning. If you go back and look at the website that I pointed out, the PBIS Vermont website, they do have an annual report that summarizes in 2012 some of the results were 113 schools in Vermont now use PBIS. That's as of the end of 2012. And that represents 72% of the supervisory unions within Vermont, or 44 out of 61 supervisory unions have implemented PBIS. One of the interesting things I found in that annual report is they actually compare schools that have not implemented PBIS, the NECAP scores for reading, with schools who have implemented PBIS, and it does show better NECAP reading scores for those schools that have implemented PBIS. So kind of interesting results if you want to look on their websites for more information. So parents, talk a little bit more specifically about using this in the home. I think before we talk about how do you use PBIS, want to revisit, why would you even want to use PBIS? I read something recently in this Duct Tape Parenting book that says, as parents, and I know I did this exactly, my husband and I adopted our kids, I spent an enormous amount of time picking the furniture out for the room and getting just the right paint colors, and I filled out tons and tons of paperwork and had documents, triple stamped by government agencies so I could go to Columbia and finish the adoption process. But what my husband and I didn't spend a lot of time on is, and we've kind of still on our journey here, is thinking about what is it we want our family to achieve, what is it we want our culture of our family to be, and we want to have a relationship with our kids. So really talking about what does that behavior look like, teaching the expected behavior, and really talking about what are logical consequences. And consequences to me, I think is one of, well, there's lots of difficult parts of parenting, but I think consequences is a very, very difficult part of thinking, like what is logical, what is a natural consequence versus what is an imposed consequence. What the PBIS in the home kind of model would suggest, that as a family you're sitting down and talking about what kind of behavior do we want to see in our family, and even going so far as to talking and getting agreement among family members about what are some of the consequences for behavior that's a problem behavior, something that's outside of our expectation. So as much as possible, if you can start these types of conversations with your kids when they're younger, probably a lot easier to do than to have your small group of teenagers around the dinner table bringing this up for the first time. So one advantage of having a school where your child is familiar with PBIS is you at least have the option, if you want to take those simple and broad rules used at the school and bring them into your home. And what you would be doing then is adapting those for the home environment. So in the context of the home. So being responsible, respectful, and helpful, what does that look like in the morning routine? Or what does that look like for our bedroom routine or bedtime routine? Or when we go out to dinner, what does that look like? Rewarding the behavior, you're recognizing, you're acknowledging the behavior. And in my family, what I wanted to be able to do is get in the car without fighting happening and go and have a group activity. So I tried to build, we tried to build rewards around group activities when we saw the behaviors that we were looking to see. So here's a little chart. If you go online, you can even find some pre-made charts. My general thought or suggestion is parents are plenty busy. So when you're thinking about what you would like to do in your own home, is to consider your own temperament. What are your children's temperament? I mean, if you're the sticker type person, then buy a ton of stickers. But if you know that using stickers is going to last about a week and then you're going to want to throw them all out, that might not be the direction that you want to head. So I would, my suggestion would be pick an area that's particularly perhaps problematic, focus on improving that, and always looking at kind of the environment, the structure, the climate of your home. So I often thought that a parent who has children who have particularly challenging, or have kids who have really, really challenging behaviors, really need to be parents that are really good at maybe putting the duct tape on. I think a lot of times I need a lot more duct tape on hand, and really observing and trying to figure out what is it that my kids are trying to say with their behavior. My kids spoke Spanish when they came into our home, so I guess it was reminded to me the importance of how much communication is nonverbal, because there was no doubt when I was in a bad place or a bad mood, I was being kind of negative, they were right there with me. And when I was positive, just my general interaction, things got better. So PBIS in your home is really fitting it to your family, to your temperament. What this particular presentation suggests is, just like in the school where they're looking for 80% of the administrators and people involved in the schools to all be on board with what are the expectations, what are the consequences, how are we going to reward and acknowledge the behavior we're seeing. It's suggested that you have 80% agreement in your family when you're setting expectations. And you really want to get contributions from everyone in your family. And also get some thoughts on asking them what kind of reward system that they would like. So again, when you're thinking of reward, think about it, I would suggest thinking about it in the very broadest sense of the word. It's not necessarily material things. It's not things that cost money. It could be, making pancakes on Sunday, or taking a walk, or reading an extra story, a little bit of one-on-one time with your family. We did take a couple polls here, which I shared the results with you. It seems like we have a mix of experience levels with PBIS, and that there's kind of a mix of people responding on how aware they are, or how good they are at having positive interactions when they, in conjunction or in contrast to negative interactions they have with kids. Some examples of how you might apply PBIS in the home. So it's really putting a lot of thought into what are the expectations and focusing on the most important things. If everything is number one, pretty much nothing is number one. So focus on what's the most important. These are some ideas. I don't have any golfers in my family, so we probably wouldn't use the golf tee idea, but I'm sure you can think of all sorts of creative ways to raise people's consciousness level. It might be doing an activity together, playing a game as a family, and things are going to change. Little kids want and need different kind of reinforcement than a teenager. Just like at the school, families need to decide what are minor misbehaviors and what are major misbehaviors. In my family, people not throwing punches and people staying safe, that was number one. So other things weren't really on my radar at all. Every family is different on that, and every family has to decide what's going to work best for them. So here's just some examples. If you had a minor misbehavior, so constantly late for school, or late for school a few times a week, you might think of a strategy. I think it's very helpful, as much as you can, to ask your kids for solutions. Hopefully in the process of having a good relationship with our kids, we're also building kids that can be self-sufficient, they're reliant, and hopefully they're internalizing that what you're asking them to do really benefits them. And so they're not always looking for the external reward, but also feeling internally that the choices they're making are good for them. So the goal of positive behavior and interventions and supports is to really focus on the positive. I would think sometimes when I would be calling my kids and they just would not respond to me, they would not come to me, and I used to think I am obviously transmitting on mother frequency and they're not listening. And so I started to listen what was coming out of my mouth, and I'm thinking, now would I be responding to me if I were them? And if the answer, when you ask that question to yourself, is, well, probably not, because just about everything that comes out of my mouth when I call them is something they haven't done right or I need them to do. You know, might want to make some different choices. Using a strategy that's based on teaching and reinforcement, we can't assume that our kids know. My kids were totally unsocialized, not totally, but a bit unsocialized. They came from Colombia, South America, so when they came here, there's lots of things that we needed to just acquaint them with, because they hadn't, you know, eaten in restaurants or been in a lot of public places or ridden in cars, that sort of thing. And to move away from punishment. There is a belief sometimes that unless someone is suffering, you know, the kid, that they aren't learning anything. And what PBIS would suggest to us is that a lot of learning can happen by staying focused on the positive and being proactive, thinking about what kind of setting do I need, what kind of environment I need, and as parents to respond, thoughtful response, and not to react. And kind of in closing, and I'm going to turn this back to Laurel, because I want her to talk about how she has used PBIS in the home. So I'm going to do that before we have our kind of our wrap-up slide. We're also going to be taking a look here if anybody has any comments or questions. We'd love to hear how you've used some positive techniques in your home. If you'd like to share with the group, we could read them aloud. So back to Laurel for some comments on PBIS in her home.
Great, thank you. So I have to admit that I haven't had a lot of experience in transferring what's happened in my daughter's school into our home. It's not that I don't think that it's a great idea. It's just one of those things as you get busy as a parent. I really hadn't learned a whole lot about it until I was preparing for this webinar, so it's something that I hope to use more in the future. I do really like the positive approach. I've been thinking a lot about in my home how I can use that more. I can feel for what Janice was saying about listening to myself, and any conversation I often have with my children is asking them to do something, re-asking them to do something that they didn't do or they didn't do correctly, and that certainly takes a very negative approach. I think the other challenge that I come up with implementing this in the home is the differences in my children, the reactions. You know, sometimes I feel like the only response that I get is when I have to go off the deep end on the negative, and that's the only way I can kind of get my point across. But and again, with varying ages, as was mentioned, that's also a challenge. Some kids are really motivated by positive reinforcement, not necessarily materially, but something that they can see, even if it's just a you know, like the pizza party at school or that kind of thing. If that works with a child in your home, I can think of one of my children in particular that probably, you know, it doesn't really mean a whole lot to her. What gets her attention is when something that she values is threatened. So I think it's really hard to kind of move to that positive approach, but that's something that I would really like to be able to do. And you know, I think children need to kind of understand it. And now that it's pretty full blown in my younger child's school, I think that gives me a little bit of an incentive. I do think it would be great if the schools could work with families so that we're consistent. I know educationally I love to be consistent with what my children are working on. I like to be able to enforce that or reinforce that at home, and I think that I'd love to work more closely with the school to make it so that it's kind of seamless. Obviously, the things that the children, in my case, our school focuses a lot on respect. They're going to be a little bit different, but really do kind of mesh with, you know, respecting yourself. That has a lot to do with what you do in the home as well, respecting others and respecting your environment. So hopefully translating that a little bit across the settings and helping kids to realize that the expectation is the same, kind of that working with the 80% being on board, so that they, you know, the expectation is there across settings for them, I think would be helpful.
So now would be a good time if you have a question or a comment, you could type that in. We're also doing a few little online polls. If you take the poll online, when you get the link to the survey, you can just ignore it. But in conclusion, hopefully you've maybe sparked a new idea in today's webinar, something maybe new you want to try. Establishing expectations and really even knowing what those expectations are for your family is a really great starting point. Allowing yourself to respond and not always to react. There's been times when I have blurted out a consequence and an hour later I thought, oh my, what did I just say? That's so illogical. It's not at all a natural consequences, and it's either way too severe or maybe way too lenient for what just happened. So I've doubled back and said to my kids, boy, I thought about this some more and I need to make a change. Supporting positive behavior. I think it's very likely that once you start seeing and recognizing the positive behavior in your kids, what I've seen in my own family is then they start to recognize the positive behavior that I'm showing them. So it can be a win-win all the way around. And enjoying your child. I guess there's that old saying that the days may seem to pass very, very slowly. But the years really, truly do fly very quickly. Laurel did have some final comments, which is good because that gives you another minute to type in a question or a comment.
I also just wanted to reiterate, I think Janice mentioned earlier about that this is not a perfect science. With my daughter's school, I know when they first started out, they had to light the board once, and so every single week it seemed, or sometimes multiple times a week, they were having a celebration or they were getting some sort of reward. And I just thought that was really a little bit too much, and I felt like it didn't teach the kids if they were always having, you know, they really need to work a little bit for it. So they did change it at the school. I actually didn't give feedback, but I'm assuming that they just figured out that that wasn't working, and it was, you know, not defeating the purpose, but that it would be more effective to have the kids work a little bit harder. So I think, you know, that's also something we have to figure out in our homes is, you know, what is too much for a reward? You know, how do we find that balance with what's gonna help and what's gonna kind of enable the kids to feel like they need to get a reward for everything that they do. So that's just what I had in closing.
So I don't see we have any questions, but I know one of the questions that sometimes comes to us, because we have been invited by schools to come in and just have very informal workshops with families around PBIS and what does it mean for the families and how they can be involved. And we do always welcome those opportunities. So if you're at a school and you think that might be helpful, you can pass our name along. But one of the questions we get is, you know, what is a logical consequence? I know that sometimes it's very easy as a parent to have the same consequence for whatever happens, which is, you know, no screen time, I'm going to turn off your phone, no television. And what logical consequences are really kind of two types. And I'm taking this from materials called Love and Logic. It's like a parenting approach that was used quite a lot in Colorado where I moved from. But there's two types of logical consequence. One is a naturally occurring consequence. which they define as usually occurring when the problem belongs to the individual on whom the consequences fall. So an example of a natural consequence is my kid, he just did not like to do his laundry or brush his teeth, and the natural consequence is if you go to school and you haven't brushed your teeth and you're wearing kind of clothes that aren't very clean, that were buried under last night's pizza, eventually someone might say to you, like, you really need to brush your teeth and take a bath. So that's a natural consequence. An imposed consequence is when the behavior creates a problem for another person, who then must impose a consequence in order to change the behavior of the individual creating the problem. And as parents, it's not always so easy to figure out what is a logical consequence. So one way to start is, what would happen to a person if they were an adult? What would the consequence be for this behavior as an adult? And chances are, it's your boss, if you don't show up for work, isn't going to take your phone away. Or, I don't know, maybe it would, but they're not going to take your phone away. So, you're going to try to think, what is the most logical thing that could happen? So if you have a dinner time and your child does not show up for dinner time, the consequence you've imposed is the dinner is over, the food is put away. Maybe they can make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So I'm giving you really simple responses, but I think consequences to be meaningful, and also rewards to be meaningful, and expected behaviors, it all takes a lot of thought. So if I don't see any other questions, I think it is time for us to sign off. I want to remind you again to visit the Vermont PBIS.org. There's also a PBIS.org. That's a national site for more information on PBIS. And you're very welcome. If you'd like to send me an email, I could try to answer any other questions or point you in the direction of other materials. My email address is Janice, it's JANICE .Sabett, SABETT @VTFN.org. And thanks again for joining us, and have a great day.